All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's stream with a guest. I called this stream Why is Data Observability Important for Data Engineers and How Does a Data Observability Platform Support them? Basically, us. I did a video on that a short time ago about data observability and with the example of Kenzo. So today I'm happy to have the co-founder of Kenzo here, Andy Petrella. So let's bring him in. Hi, Andy.
Hey, Andreas.
Welcome. So
Thanks.
nice to have you here. I think it would be cool if you say 2-3 words about how you got to that point where you are right now and
Mhm.
why that topic is so important for you.
Uh, yeah, so I got here, right, doing, hours and hours, countless hours working on this topic, right? So I have a background in as a data engineer, right? So originally I started as not data engineer, I was a data miner, right?
Mhm.
Remember this term, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? So the people that
Yeah.
were mining the data, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
reminds the book, Mining Massive Data Sets that you may have read. And so I was both a data miner and a software engineers because, well, back then there was not enough data or projects around data. So I had to combine both profile in the companies that were working. And I was mainly working with defense, government, and geospatial data. So that
Mm.
was really what I was doing because in the early 2000s, no Twitter, no, not much Google or Facebook whatsoever, not a lot of data. So most of the data was available in governments, basically. So that's why
Mm.
I was doing this kind of job there, or of course at banks and stuff like this. But yeah, not as much as today. So basically, this is my kind of profile, right? So I both worked in data and in a highly governed environment, right? So everything I had to do with the data had to be reported, explained, even before sometimes, which is, as we know, super hard. But because we had little projects, a few projects, it was possible. Few data, few projects. It's actually pretty easy somehow to explain what you're gonna do because you don't have a lot of libraries, you don't have a lot of algorithms, you don't have a lot of power to do whatever you want anyway. So you stick with a few algorithms and a few reports that you can build. So it was kind of easy. Then at some point I was fed up, with this kind of job, right? And discovered something that was really nice, which is the Spark, Apache Spark, right? A framework that you all know probably, right?
Mm.
And I started using this thing like in 2010, late 2010, right? So yeah, 11 years ago now, 11, 12, almost. So I had to compile it back then. I had to git clone and then SBT publish local, and then I had to compile it in order to use it. It was '06, and I know I felt in love with this framework, and I decided to move on and explore the different paths that we can do with data in 2010, right, with the new social network and everything we could do. So I started with Spark, and I created something called the Spark Notebook,
Mhm.
which is a kind of Jupyter dedicated to Spark and Scala in 2013. And because the Spark Notebook had a pretty good reputation, a lot of people were using it in big companies. I discovered, especially in the US, right, what people were capable of doing in the notebooks. Connecting with a plenty of data, working on plenty of data, publishing everything in the data lake, database, whatever. And I said, oh my, what's going on?
Mm. Yeah.
What is actually going on here, right? So it goes too fast, no clear understanding on what is really happening at any point in time. And when we kind of move to production, which ultimately boiled down to publishing a few scripts back then, right? um, of course we end up in situation where issues were happening, as is still happening, right? And we had basically no information about what was happening and why, right? And
Mm.
that created a lot of problems, right, as you can imagine, and we can dive into that afterwards. And I decided to say, okay, look, the Spark Notebook is nice, but there is something else that will come after, right? Because the Spark Notebook is one thing, but that actually needs to be done in the data world. So what I have done then is that I've spent 7 years on thinking about what are the different principles that needs to be applied in data. And after a few years, what would be the platform that would support that? And that goes down to creating Kansu and the platform that we're supporting nowadays.
Mm.
It's long, but at least it gives a
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
when I've been there. Yeah.
I think it's very interesting that you came from that point where, okay, now you built something, and how do you manage this this thing, this and these pipelines that you built? Because that's something I think every engineer struggles with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sadly, right? Like any engineers, not even data engineers, any engineers actually struggle with whatever they put in production,
Yeah.
right? So
When did you found Kenzo, by the way?
I founded it in 2016,
Ah, cool.
6 years ago now. Yeah.
Nice. And now you're writing a book.
Yeah.
I've heard. So, what's that all about? I'm guessing.
Well, it's about fishing, of course, right? Because or basketball. No, actually, I've been working for the last years a lot with an editor that I like a lot, which is O'Reilly.
Mm.
Um, Actually, in 2015, I gave one of the first online training courses. It was called Building Distributed Data Science Pipelines.
Mhm.
Right, in 2015, it was about using Spark, Kafka, Cassandra, and the machine and MLlib, Spark MLlib, and Aka, Scala Aka. So, what is the odd one? So, I will let you figure out. But anyway, and over the years, I kept working with them. I published 2 reports already: what is data observability and what is data governance, right? And recently, because data observability is becoming so interesting, so appealing, is a new category. So we actually consider working on a full-blown book that would actually be about the 7 years of reflection that I got on this topic, right? So data observability is a word that is out there for let's say for 18 months, right? But I mean, what is behind is not that new, right? So that's what we're going to work on this book, right? So which will be called The Fundamentals of Data Observability. And I'm on the 3rd chapter now. So
Okay. So it's going to take you how long, until next year, or what do you guess when it's due?
So I will work on it until second quarter of next year, right? So we'll be delivering actually one chapter over time, right? So between 4 and 6 weeks, there will be 4 and 6 weeks between each chapter. We delivered the chapter last week, I believe, right? The first chapter is available on our website and Kensu's and websites too. The next chapter should be released, I think, in a couple of weeks max. Something. So we were working on this for 10 months again, I would say, but it will be there forever. So I will leave a stone, of course.
So can you already download a part of this? Can people download this?
Yes, it's available on the website. So you can go to kensu.io, and then there will be a banner, and then below you will have access to the book. Yeah.
Okay.
In pre-release, draft mode. So.
Okay, I'm going to put after our stream. I'm going to put a link below this video for it. Okay, cool. So who's by the way, who are you targeting for this? So what's the optimal reader for this? Beginners, or is this more for the intermediate,
somebody
who has been working in engineering for a long time and just figure out this a topic in itself, let's say?
Yeah. So okay, let's rewind a little bit. I'm not going to answer directly the question. So may I ask a question first?
Sure.
Right. So at what level do you teach people to log and test?
Generally, you start in the beginning. You start quite early for that, right?
Yeah.
Because it needs to go into their, I would almost say, nature. Like whenever they develop something, it has to be there, right?
So you have the answer. So basically, because it's so related in a way to testing, logging, measuring, creating trust, and everything. And as you said, it's in the core. It's in the I like to say it's in the ADN, right? NDA, right? No,
DNA.
DNA. Thanks. Everything is reversed, right? So NDA is on disclosure. ADN is in French. So I'm a speaker. So DNA. Thank you. Right. So it's in the DNA of any engineer, right? That actually wants to develop something. Right? But there's also addressing the message to the architects, right? They need to think about, okay, I need to create a platform, right? That needs to support what the best practices and the habits of engineering. What do I need to put into my platform in order to make sure that these habits are well supported, right? It's pretty much like you have people working on logs and metrics and tasks, but there is nothing in the platform that can actually aggregate and leverage a skill. Like, I don't know, Jenkins or, whatever, ELK, things like this. So I'm addressing the message to both of them. And when I say engineers, I'm not limiting to data pure engineers, right? So actually there is a kind of a message that can be also embraced, I hope so, by also data scientists and even data analysts, because I mean, in a way, this is where we're going.
Yeah, yeah. It's not really bound to the data engineer role, but let's say it's an engineering feature, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're a data scientist, you're doing software engineering basically, and then you need a solution for this.
It's a skill. So a lot of people are talking about like it's a tool or whatever. No, first and foremost, it's a skill. It's something that you need to embrace, need to understand, and apply almost every day, right? I would say every time you do something with the data that will go in production at some point, right? This is something that needs to be part of some part of the responsibility.
Yeah. Priyanka asks here, can you repeat the book name once again?
Yes.
Please.
So it's Fundamentals of Data Observability. So it's available on the already platform, or you can download it directly from our website, which is kensu, KENSU.io.
So we're talking a lot about data observability. Maybe somebody hasn't looked that much in it. So how could you explain this to somebody who just starts out with that?
It's actually pretty easy. Observability is there for some years now, right? When we talk about Datadog, Prometheus, Splunk, or all these things, right? These are technologies that are creating some information about how a system is behaving, right? I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about applications, right? How the infrastructure is behaving, how the applications are behaving, right? And you have multiple areas that can be observed, right? What you want to do is that from external side, right? So you want to understand how this thing is working. You want to understand how the infrastructure is working, how the applications are working, etc., right? So basically from the outside world, understanding what the heck is going on, right? And you cannot access it, right? You cannot log to the platform. You cannot log to the applications or whatever, right? So you have to observe it. Why? Because every time that you touch something, you change it, right? Maybe your action's actually changing everything, or it's not at the right time or whatever. So that's why you cannot really touch it. So observability is a capability of a system to provide information about what's going on, right? And data observability is one of the dimensions, because data is something that is happening in a big system, right? It's used in applications, it's supported by the platform, it's used for analytics, it's used by people and stuff. There is a security, right, around it. So basically what you want to understand with data observability is create another facet on your system to understand how it's working. So because the data can be influenced by the infrastructure, which is supporting it, right? Because at some point, maybe there is not enough disk, then you don't get the data you want because there is no more disk, right? Or you know what I mean, right? So we've been there.
Yeah,
And
been there.
this kind of oversize or whatever that we can run into. And the other side, right, the platform can actually fail because the data that gets in is too big, right? There is always a relationship that exists between each of the components of the system that can be used by external people to understand what is going on, right? So data observability, if you think as a machine learning guy, right, is one of the dimension, a feature, if you want, that explains how a system is behaving, right? And it's observation, right? So when we talk about the machine learning, each row is an observation, right?
Yeah.
So here we're talking about an observation, and we have a few features that are dedicated to data.
I think this is, people see this also very often in other topics, like you are using an API from, I had a student before, he used an API from Apple where
Yeah.
they were processing data and then Apple changes something, tells nobody that they changed something, and then a day later you figure out, oh, your pipeline is broken, right? Because you have no observability in there, you're flying blind. Or
Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. In this case, there is two things that had happened, right? First, there you have no observation. You don't have any information that comes from your system that explains what's going on with the API, right?
Mhm.
This is the first thing. The second thing is that you expect, we come into the expectation now, you expect the model to never change. So you expect that the assumptions that you had in the model when you start creating your application, these assumptions, because they're nothing but assumptions, will are true forever in the future.
That's true. That's actually true.
Right? So basically you never check it, right? So you get the data, I'm processing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Kasim's a story of a data engineer. Yeah, but sometimes it's not the fault of the engineer, let's say, because you implement this database and you use the model that is there right now, and at some point maybe it's because it's not your database, they change something on the other side and forget to tell everybody who uses it,
Yeah.
and then you get to the same point, right? So
yeah, and this will happen once, and the second time, right? When someone will, I mean, because you will need to remediate this, right? Because of course the data is missing or is misplaced or whatever, there will be like weeks spent in trying to figure out how to fix it, right? Because of course you don't have access to the data, you need to access to the database, you want to production data, but you will not have it, etc. So it takes forever to fix. But that means that the next time someone will want to change the database, right? It will also take forever because the first thing they may want to do is to try to commit as much anticipatively to change it. So what happens is that most of the time we don't even change anymore. You may actually duplicate the data and take a path to avoid changing it, right?
yeah,
You see what I mean, right? So which is nuts. Basically, you duplicate the data because you don't know if you can change it. It's pretty much like APIs. V1, I'm going to create a V2 because I don't know who is actually using the V1.
Yeah, and then I had that before actually, and then you run into problems like, oh, now we have that old deprecated API that some people are still using. And like,
Exactly.
It's a nightmare. Yeah. And oh man, this topic is very close to to what I struggle through very often. So I guess for engineers, it's this whole concept, or for everybody who's creating software, creating data pipelines, or also data scientists, this concept is something they should embrace. There was actually, how was that called? I think you also have that on the website, data observability driven development. I think it's a like big thing.
But that's the thing I'm still working on, right? So there is the foundation that are there, right? And so DOD, right? So data observability driven development. It's, let's say it's to data engineering what TDD is to software engineering, right? So there are multiple components part of data driven. Not everybody is applying TDD, right? A few people are really applying to TDD, to be honest, right? But it makes sense to everyone, right? If you will run into someone and you explain what TD is, right? So test-driven development, right? That means that you write your test first, and then you write the code that actually matching the test, right? It makes sense to everyone. It just doesn't make sense from a practical, let's say, a perspective where it's too much cumbersome, etc., right? But basically, TDD has defined a series of habits, right? A series of different, best practices, let's say, right, that are combined together to create the TDD thing. And actually nowadays, what happens with TDD is that we pick, the one that we are more interested into that we can apply every day, right? But at least it creates a canvas, right? What would be the perfect world, let's say, right? And what I'm working on for years is how to create the perfect world also. It doesn't mean that we have to apply everything, right? But again, we can cherry pick whatever makes sense. Like, what are my responsibility as an engineer, right? What should I check, when, why, for whom, right? What do I need to do before going in production, right? What is the level of quality before going to production? What is the different information that I need to produce, logs, before moving to production? Because there may be some corner cases that we run into that I want to be able to figure out later on, right? So these are all the plenty of questions that we want to anticipate, even sometimes before even developing, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so is this something new?
No. It's not new. I mean, the term is new, right? It's as new as data engineering is new. Is data engineering new?
The name, not the job, right?
Okay. So there you go. Actually, so it's not new. It's just that it's scaled, right? So it's kind of, before we were like a few people in a company that were of 20 or 40,000 people, right? We were a few people with this kind of skills or this kind of interest, right? And actually we raise, the awareness and then the interest, and then we grow the people. So at some point that we became visible, and our value actually was actually appreciated, and we wanted to, and the company want to bet on this, right? So this is what data engineering became over time, but we were always there. And data observability is the same thing, right? So like observability used to be in software engineering, right? Basically, this needs this kind of habits, best practices of publishing information about how the data is being used and what is happening with the data has always been there, right? It's just that because we are producing more and more projects, we have more and more people working on projects, we have more and more people willing to produce more projects with the data, right? Stakeholders, then actually this is becoming something really important to embrace right away and to support in architecture. So basically not new, but it actually grown over time.
That makes sense. Ekaterina says, what do you observe in the system? It looks like you look from the software point of view, not from the data quality point of view.
Yeah. So data quality is a different topic, right? So it can be addressed somehow by data observability, right? But let's say I'm working in a pandas code, right? What I want to observe on my pandas code is gonna work, run into a Lambda function or whatever somewhere, right? Or scaled by by Airflow, who knows? What I want to observe, right, is what I want to produce from application. I want my pandas code to produce information is what is the data being consumed by pandas? What do I read? What are the CSV files that I'm reading? What are the Parquet files that I'm reading, right? So this information I want my code to produce, right? In order to relate my pandas code with the data that are being used, right? And then I want my pandas code to let me know, to let me observe, me or someone else. That's important. Me or someone else. The people I will actually tell, okay, guys, this is yours now, right? So basically you have to handle it in production. Right? At some point,
Yeah, also you're working usually in a team, so it's not just you. So
yeah, it's not like pushing, but I have other things to do. I have another project to run into, so we're gonna have to team it. This is the data ops in a way, right? So basically, there's people that can actually make sure that everything's running fine. So basically, the pandas application, I want it actually to produce information about what it produces, right? So because the application knows everything, but also I want my application to produce information about information being consumed. The schema maybe of the files that I'm consuming and the database that I'm consuming. Why? Because when I produce my pandas code, I'm assuming that certain information are there, right? So I want to make sure that this information is still there. So I want to be able to observe that these assumptions, right, are still holding true in my application later on, right? And this is always related to the data in the context of application. And the same likewise for the data that I'm going to produce. Imagine that I'm producing some information into a database that has a schema change, right? My write will actually fail because the data is not there anymore, or the type has changed. So these are also the things that I want to make sure that the application are capable of producing. And what kind of information also I want to produce from the application is the content of the data, right? So basically, when I read in Pandas some data, right? So there is something that we always do, or very often when we do the exploration, right? So we read some data during the notebook, whatever exploration phase, and we see there's a few columns that has a few null values. What do we do? .na.drop. Okay? Because, okay, so I don't need that, I get rid of it. But what if, right, at some point in production, the na.drop removes like 25% of the data, and not only 2, right?
Problematic, yeah.
So,
I think it happened to me before.
so what do you want to do? So when you write this down, I mean, let's be honest, you know that you're doing something that can be a problem later on, right? You know that this na drop can have consequences, which we call corner cases, right? So basically, what we want to do is to do like something like that na and then some log it, so metrics about the amount of information that I know, right? And then we drop them, so that you know how much information you're getting rid of, right? So this is the kind of information you want to log. Why? It's not about data quality. It's about making sure that whatever you do with the data, right, is under control. And then later on, it may boils down to the data is not good, right? It's not because at some point you have less values than in the past that the data is a bad quality, right? I have this example where, we have this marketing team that has removed the mandatory field from the phone text field, right? People register into website, they have to fill, at some point they have to fill mandatory the phone, so they provide it, even if it's fake, whatever, but they provide it. At some point you remove it because there is a bounce rate which is increasing, right? What happens, in order to reduce the bounce rate, you remove the mandatory because you figure out that there's a problem, right? What happens at some point is you have way less phone information. But if the sales people are relying on this information to do the business, at some point they will yelling like, "Oh, what is happening? I don't have any information. Everything's gone, blah, 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 blah." And the data is good quality. It's just that changed, right? So what you want to know is what are the influences. So you want to be notified before at some point you're getting rid of a lot of data. It doesn't mean that the data is bad quality, but you want to have some information when the people will be yelling at you and why this is happening, what it used to be before, where the data is coming from, etc., in order to understand, what you can answer, because this person is highly upset, right, at this moment.
It also helps for then the search of the problem, right? So it's not just figuring out what's wrong and somebody looks at it and don't understand it, but like I get to the problem very fast.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to because the pipeline is huge on not only one application, so you need to correlate information over time, right? And over time in the pipeline to understand, okay, where is what we call the root cause, right? You can still patch data, right? So imagine that you have these null values for the phone. You can fill them, right? So with non-null values, it doesn't mean much, right? But you can try to reconcile, right? What you may have to do instead is what we call backfilling, right? So you will try to find where the data was lost for the first time, right? So you need to go back to this moment and then we run everything.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that you want to do faster, and not logging into the different machines, looking at the logs. Maybe this is what is happening, and then go to the data, SQL run, SQL blah, SQL tip, etc. You're running forever. You don't want to do it anymore.
It's exactly how I've done it in the past. There's a nice question from Ekaterina here again. How does it work? Basically, how do you get the data? Do you install agents? When I looked at Kenzu, that was actually what I really liked, how you solved that. So maybe you say a few words why you went this route. and how it works, because
Yeah.
I think it's great.
So basically, as I said, right? So what I've taken best practices and the things that worked already in software engineering, which was using agents, right? In order to get visibility about the applications, the platform, and everything, agents were attached to the application, the servers, in order to get this visibility, right? And that's what we do also at Kensu, is that we extend these capabilities that are already there, right? In order to produce extra information about the data, right? So we have agents in Python, in R, in Scala, Spark, SQL, or whatever, but which will be directly attached to the applications that will produce metadata, locations, lineage, statistics. You can configure your own, right? And even rules, right? So the code can even actually produce rules right away to a platform, for instance, to say, look, this is my assumption for the data, right? That, for instance, the number of null values has not grown by more than 5% since last time I ran it, right? Because I don't know exactly the rank, right? Maybe it grows, etc. But you know that there is some inflation that you cannot be not aware of, right? Doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that you want to be aware of them, right? So the code can actually publish these also with these agents. So it's a combination of something that can be automated from the agents, combining all this information, and also use the brain, the domain knowledge of the people in the code, right, in order to produce extra information, extra valuable observations, so to speak. Yeah.
I called that in my video, I called that a wrapper around, for instance, around pandas.
Yeah.
And I really like that, because I remember times and times when you had to install agents, then you had to go onto the servers, you had to install the agents, you have to configure the agents for every machine that you want to run. And it was annoying. So that it's directly attached to the to the application, to the code. That's really cool.
That's what happened a lot. So this is something that we used to use for years now in the Java environment, right? So we attach a jar directly to the JVM, and then it's going to do the trick, right? Or we have facets, we have interceptors, that will actually do the trick, right? And those are the different strategies that I'm describing in the book that I'm writing now, the third chapter. All the different strategies that can be used in order to generate this information in a kind of automated way, if you want, right? So there is monkey patching. The wrapper you're talking about is monkey patching, is extending pandas with extra capabilities in order to do most of the trick, right? Like coding, describing the data frame and putting it into a platform, for instance, as simple as that. But you have, as I said, aspect-oriented programming, you have interceptors, you have hooks, you have a range of actually system that nowadays can be leveraged to simplify the job and increase adoption of this kind of habits and the best practice.
Eka has a few good questions here. But then you don't monitor, for example, data exchange between systems, for instance, SaaS applications. So I think that's a good question. Would you say that's something else? That's a different, that's more a platform monitoring problem, or?
So if this is about between two SaaS applications, right? Then you don't have access to them, right? So basically, that's SaaS application. So maybe there are 3 or 4 cases here. So the question is not fully clear. So if a refinement of the question would be great, right? But I'm trying to take a first stab on it, right? So basically, data migration from a SaaS, let's say, I don't know, a SaaS CRM, right? SaaS CRM, and you extract the data and you put it into your data lake, whatever, right? There is an application that does the ingestion, right? Might it be Airbyte or Spark or, I don't know, Azure Data Copy, who knows, right? So whatever. Mm-hmm. Actually, the idea is that this application, which does ingestion, which is doing the ingestion of data transfer, right, actually can be extended with data observability, right? And then you can control on how the data is being ingested, right? And the other way around, if you push information to a SaaS system, there is something that distributes the data to this, right? This is also where data observability can be created, right? If you have two SaaS applications working together, right, and there is something in between which is also kind of black box, well, there you don't have much to do, right? So you're pretty much stuck with what the SaaS application are providing, right? But because they are doing some data stuff, nowadays I believe that the users, the people who are handling this SaaS applications from the customer perspective needs to ask them to actually to be data observable. I mean, this is something that you can ask into your package. Okay, this is SaaS application needs to provide information about how the data is being transferred, etc., etc. Right? This has been introduced with GDPR, by the way. Right? Only respecting GDPR between two applications, you need to have this contract in place, right, to make sure that the data is known, right? So you can extend this kind of capabilities to say, look, the GDPR is important, right? But I want to extend it with more visibility, right? I don't know if that answered the question. So if not, I can refine.
She says thank you. So I'm guessing that solved it. So we talked about that it's a big thing, that it's important. Now comes the problem that usually you don't in larger companies, you don't make the decisions on your own, right? So you have stakeholders or managers that actually need to make the decision. Okay, we're doing this. You're okay to invest time. You're okay to invest money in this. How would you present that to them?
So so it's relatively easy, I would say, at some point where they have already some process in place, right? Because we are talking a lot to CDOs, for instance, and large companies also, right? And these people often are exposed to the problem faced by the businesses, high stakeholders, because the report is not good, because the model is going cuckoo, right? Or whatever, right? And this level, right, either them or their data office, right, has to face actually this kind of anger, right? And because of this, right, so they look at their teams and they love their team, right? And they are struggling with the fact that they are not able to answer within weeks, right? So that means that they have their priority list of projects, right? And they see some of their projects actually moving and delayed because they have part of their team actually trying to figure out how the heck the problem has happened, right? So basically, purely operational wise, right, they cannot two things, right? First, operational, they have an OpEx which is growing like crazy because they have very valuable data engineers, very well paid, let's put it this way, right, that are working on some, data checkings or whatever, right, going into the logs or whatsoever. This is one, so OpEx is growing, and they cannot actually generate more value because these people are actually bottlenecks to create more value in your projects, right? So they can work on both. So basically, when you do, the math, you cannot grow your business with data with a team that is kind of, let's say, fixed size. You always have to grow your team in order to be able to absorb first the requests coming from the business and to handle problems that will happen anyway, right? And this is of course not sustainable, right? So you cannot build a business, like this. It cannot work. And actually, the people will also be, annoyed by this kind of work, right? So basically, the people who work on project that cannot have any more time to work on new project because they have to handle so many things, at some point they're bored. So what do? They have a huge value in the market. Let's be honest, they move on. But that means that the people that come in, they have little information about what has been deployed, which makes them work a little bit more, even more harder, right? So it's not sustainable, basically. So at some point, and because it happens, it doesn't take time before these kind of things happen, right? Like the data cascades, the Google Pepper data cascades in the high stake AI. I don't know if you read it.
No.
So it's a great paper, 10 pages. They explain basically that whatever data has a problem, it has huge consequences. And they run a survey where they define that 92% of the people they surveyed, like thousands of people, said that for a project, they encounter at least one problem, right? 92%. It's okay, right? But after three projects, I did the math, it's pretty easy. If you deliver 3 projects, 100% that one of them will have a problem, right? It's a mathematical computer, right? So, but you don't know when, you don't know which, you don't know why, and you don't know for whom, right? So basically, you know that you have a problem, and you just can't sleep anymore because it's certain, right? It can take 6 months. It can take only 2 weeks. So so basically, all these things are matter today, right? And there is something that I didn't say yet, right? But when you are on the phone, you're the CDO, or you are the PO, the product manager for the data, whatever, and you're in front of the customer, and there is a problem, and you cannot answer. What happens? You lose confidence into yourself and your team, right? Ultimately, you the next time you're gonna deploy something, you're gonna be like this, right? And you lost the trust of your business users, like instantly, right?
Yeah.
And it took months or maybe years to build, but it takes only seconds actually to lose. So that means that this person, I mean, put yourself into the shoes of this one. The next time, say, I have a huge project I can do. We did some exploration with the data. We can produce this, and then, they will be a little bit stepping back. Say, okay, but you sure it's gonna work? What are the certainties you want to build? What will be some kind of SLAs? What will be the quality of what you? And this is where the quality comes in, right? Because we have the tendency to say, look, I can produce this, so we don't exactly understand the business behind it, but when we talk to you, you understand it, and you can tell us if there is a value, but we cannot say if it has a good quality or not, because you know the business, we don't, right? And this is where there is a kind of mismatch. One will say, will think, okay, these are their problem to understand the quality later on, because I don't know. On the other side, this guy give me the data, so this is the problem, the data is not of good quality, right? So this is where I'm changing a little bit the dynamic here, is that people producing the data are responsible to provide as much information about what they produce, and the people who understand the data can produce expectations, as I said, right? So I'm expecting this, that, and that, and that, right? It doesn't have to come right away, but it can be built over time, right? So, okay, so because we have the observability in place, we know what's going on, we detect corner cases, right? Then we can actually create assumptions around them, and we can control them, right? This kind of iterative process. So what we've been doing for years now, and it works really well.
Okay.
Hope it makes sense. 31.
So, where are you heading now? With Kenzo? You said 2016. You founded it.
Yeah.
From what I have seen, it's basically a finished product.
Yeah.
Right. So what's your future? What are you looking for? What's your outlook?
So we have grown quite a lot, right? So as you can imagine, so what we were doing was not well understood, until maybe 18 months ago, right? But we've seen this kind of traction growing like crazy. So we had already customers, and we grown quite a lot now. So not only where I am, because I'm from Belgium, right? So we grew the business first in Europe, but we see that also the US market is growing like crazy. So that's why nowadays what we've done is that we changed the dynamic also in the company, and we have a new CEO, Eleanor, that joined us like 3 weeks-ish ago now in the US, who will drive, the business, all over, in order to grow and to create, the success story that we all want at Kensu, because and with partnership with our customers. So that's where we're heading, right? Basically, try to observe and to help people observing whatever they did the data all over. So it's pretty exciting time for us, to be honest. I'm very pleased for the last 18 months about, when even with the COVID, it didn't really impact us much, right? So basically we're growing the team, so we're still hiring. So if people are around and then willing to check us out, so they can come directly to us, and then happy to discuss, come to website also, of course. So yeah.
Do you have something on the product itself where you say, oh man, this would be a cool feature to have, let's say, a year down the road or something?
I think that no, so I have plenty of features, right? So that will come down the roads, right? What's super interesting, so a data observability platform. So if you talk at the platform now, right, the interesting thing about the platform is to let the people know what they don't have time to look at, right? Because it's cool to have observability, but the interesting things about observability is that information flows naturally, right? That means that someone can observe it, but someone can also be a machine, right? So this is where the platform fits in, right? So the machine doesn't have to access the data, right? Or the whatever. So basically, where we stand now with this, which are the features that we work on, right, is proposing directly, so this is what we are going to issue in the next version, proposing rules, expectations, assumptions, right? So, and ultimately down the road, we will be able to actually create anomalies, right? But I have a take on anomalies, right? So generating or writing the alerts, right, about, oh, this is a problem, right?
Mm.
The thing is, what is cool with data observability is that we are now at hand information that we never had before. Lineage combined with metrics, with a schema and stuff like this, combining this with incidents be detected due to the rules that were created and the remediation and everything, we are at the doorstep of a huge amount of information about how the data is actually being used and the project that are constructed around it, right? So basically, with enough information about how these expectations are created, incidents being generated and figured out, the idea is to generate valuable anomalies. But we don't have enough information nowadays to do this without creating an alert fatigue, like, oh, we think that is bad, we think that this is bad, we think this is bad, right? At some point, people are like, meh,
It's always the danger. That's something from my history where, like, if you set some hard, so it needs some kind of analysis behind it, not just like strict rules, because people are getting tired of having these rules and then having false how is it, is this a false positive, let's say a false, false positive, right? You're getting errors and errors and errors, and at some point people are like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So you don't want that.
Exactly, two topics there, right? So basically, there is this, okay, I getting annoyed with that, which is the alert fatigue. So basically, everything that is being sent is wrong, right? And there is also the fact that there is something that tells you that there is a problem, right? It doesn't tell why. So the first thing that you take, I say, is this thing right? So you're gonna check, right, if it's okay, or actually this thing is actually not a problem. So you take this distance right away, because there is something that tells you that you may have done something wrong. So psychologically, you're gonna have some reserve, right? Ultimately. So the way we take, in order to get this information about what really is an anomaly, what is not, right, is that we do what used to work really, efficiently in the past, in my experience, is that we propose rules, something that can be understood, like there is a range, there is a variation, there is a kind of event that can happen. What do you think? You want to tune maybe the parameters of this rule so that there is a human validation in a way, something that they can understand. If someone has shifted by more than 10%, this they can understand, right? This is a problem because an outlier, for whatever reason, they don't know, right? So they have to do the analysis to understand what is the problem behind it. So this is the pattern we have to take in order to generate from data to information to insights.
That's true. Yeah. I think what the agents are sending over to the platform, that and how this is done, like with all the metadata, it gets fair. It's already a good step towards that, right? To have a clever approach to that, and not just here's the rule that I just thought of, and like I have no idea if that's correct or not. It's just rule of thumb, and like,
So so actually, this is like the expectations, right? So what is really important with data that I've struggled like months, right, before I nailed it in a way, I hope, right? Basically, data quality is something that is specific to the usage, right? So depending how I'm going to use the data, I will have a different perception of the quality I'm getting, right? Pretty much like any product, right, in a way. So if I have an iPhone, depending on how I'm going to use the iPhone, conversely, the others will actually, I will have a different perspective on how the iPhone, what is the quality of the iPhone that I have in hand, right? So basically, and this is even more true with data, because with data, you may have a table, right? 100 columns, right? It's not possible that this table has the same quality for every consumers, right? They will have different way of using it. They will have different perspective. For each column, you may have, I don't know, 10 different statistics, quality statistics computation can do, and then doing it column by column, then you can combine, and then you can do plenty of things. The amount of metrics that can be used for quality purpose, right, is actually combinatorial. It means that what is interesting is to inverse a little bit the tendency is, look, actually, I'm a consumer. I can produce some quality metrics, so to speak, about what I was expecting from that, right? From my own perspective. It's like SLA, right? Almost. But there is no real contract. It's more like, okay, my contract with the producer is to produce information about the expectation that I'm unmatched at some point, so that we can discuss in order to figure out what is the problem. Was that my understanding of the data was my problem, or the data is not coming the way it should be anymore, stuff like this. It's to create communication, because it's too hard otherwise.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So for me, maybe we wrap this up. For me, this is a topic, and you said in the past 18 months, this really blew up, or this is still blowing up, right? For me, this is something that is dependent, or that comes from the applications in the field. Like, people are doing more and more with data, and people are also not in the office anymore most of the time. So you need a way of working together, and not like where you don't see yourself, where you don't see eye to eye. No, eye to eye is the wrong word. I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, indeed.
And the collaboration is a bit difficult. So this is growing the more work is done with data, which is basically endless.
Of course. So I think you have thought about it, right? But we're talking about data engineering, right? We're talking about machine learning engineering, right? So engineering, they're not creating data. No one creates data. We create something that will generate data, right? This is the something that we are actually controlling. We don't control the data. We control the thing, right, that has created the data, right?
Yeah.
This is engineering, right? So this is where the data, this is where information should come from. Yeah.
Right. And so where can people find you? Is LinkedIn the best place?
LinkedIn, of course, the website, Kensu.io, on GitHub, on Twitter, so Nootsap. So yeah, I'm in different places. I'm going a lot also in different events. So I'm giving talks and speech. So not only about Kensu, but about the book, of course, and the data observability mindset and stuff like this. So I'm pretty easy to reach. So and by email. So don't hesitate to reach me out during using these channels.
Nice. I'm also going to put a link to your Instagram, to your LinkedIn below.
I'm not on Instagram, so not on TikTok either.
Instagram is somehow for our line of work. Instagram is not the perfect tool.
I will be maybe on YouTube and Twitch soon in order to give demonstration and
Cool.
and training and stuff like this. So that would be a good way also to collaborate. But yeah, so I will be out there.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks a lot for your time and everybody's questions. That were great.
Yeah, there were some really, really great questions. Yeah.
Oh, maybe I thought out, right? So there is the sandbox thing, right? So if you want to try out, you can go to our sandbox, right? Which is sandbox.kensuapp.com, right? And you can use it. So you can log it, freely with Google, right? Your Google email, whatever. And then you log in, and then you can see already prepared data set. You can use our open, because the agents, most of them are open source, right? So it's on our GitHub. There is documentation. Everything you want to know, right, is out there. You can explore it, and they will, of course, make sure that you can be a coach if necessary, using the chat box also that you will find on the application itself. So if you want to try it, go ahead.
That's true. That's a very good point. And I would add one thing. If you're on the couch and you don't have a computer and just want to see this quickly, I made a video about this. So check out my YouTube videos where I went through this. But I highly recommend checking this out, because for me, this is the future. So yeah. Okay. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Andreas. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.